Hello and welcome to this session on F5 certificate automation in CertCentral. For those of you following our certification training, this is part of the CertCentral Expert Certification track. My name is Dave Corbett. I'm a Sales Engineering Manager here at DigiCert. So I'm going to be showing you a demo of how we do automation of certificates on the F5 platform in CertCentral. Before I do that, I'll take you through a couple of important points. First of all, you need to go through what we call a one-time setup for any F5 load balancers that you want to automate within our CertCentral platform. And the setup involves a couple of things. First of all, you're going to need to make sure you've got at least one DigiCert sensor in your network, which is able to communicate with your F5. The sensor is just a piece of software that you can download from CertCentral, and it can run on a variety of different platforms. The sensor actually is something you may already have in your network, because the sensor, as well as doing the automation functions, it can also do the discovery function. So if you're using our discovery feature in CertCentral to give you a full inventory of all your SSL certificates, you may already have one of these sensors already in your network. So let's assume you've already got the sensor installed. The next thing you have to do is configure it with the credentials of the F5 that you want to automate. So what that means is you need to put in the management IP address and port number, also the admin login and password. These credentials obviously are very sensitive. So once we have them, they are stored on the sensor, but they're stored in an encrypted fashion so that in case the sensor is ever compromised, the hacker will not be able to get the credentials for your F5. So that's the setup. And then when you want to automate the certificate issuance or reissuance on your F5, there's a couple of ways that you can do that from within the CertCentral platform. The first way is probably the simple way. You just log into CertCentral, you go to the automation area, which I'll show you that in a few moments. And you can just then schedule a date and time for the new certificate to be deployed and installed on your F5. The other option, which again, I'll show you how to do this, is what we call the auto renew option, where you can just configure CertCentral to automatically issue, download, and install a certificate onto your F5 at any time before the current one is due to expire. And like I say, that will happen automatically. So that will continue to happen forever, if you like, or for as long as you let it and before you log in and tell it to stop doing that. So some customers like that. It's like a policy-based automation where you can just set the policy and then you don't have to do anything else. Some customers prefer to have a bit more manual intervention, and they would prefer to do the manual scheduling of the certificate reissue or renew. So I'll show you both of those options when we come to do the demonstration. Also, just want to show you a little bit more about kind of the architecture of how automation works. And in the middle of this picture, you can see what we call the sensor. So the sensor, again, is a bit of software. As you can see, this can be deployed onto different platforms. So whether you prefer to have it on a Red Hat, a Windows, or a Docker platform, we support all those platforms. So you just download it and install it in that platform. And then, as I mentioned, it's very important that the sensor is able to communicate with your F5. And for that, it needs to know what we call the management IP address and port number, of course, of your F5. Also, though, important to remember that what we're doing here is we're going to be automating the life cycle of certificates that live on what we call the data IP address, or in F5 terms, the virtual IP or the VIP. Okay, so in most F5 configurations that we come across, the F5 hosts the SSL certificate and it terminates the SSL connection at the F5. So that is the configuration that we're going to be focusing on in this session today. If you do not have certificates on your F5, but instead you're using the F5 in a kind of pass-through mode, and the certificate is actually installed on the server, which is located behind the F5, that's a different configuration. We can support that within CertCentral, but we wouldn't be using the particular configuration that we're going to focus on today. So just to be clear, what we're going to look at today is a typical configuration where the F5 is terminating the SSL connection from the client on the internet, and therefore the SSL certificate, or more than one perhaps, certificates are hosted as well on the F5. So what we'll need to distinguish when we look at the demo is different IP addresses on the F5. We'll look at the management IP address, and we'll also look at the virtual IP address, also called the data IP address. Okay, so I'm going to move on and do the demonstration, and I'm going to show you, as I mentioned, two options that we have. So the first one I'll show you is very simply, how do you log into CertCentral, schedule a reissue of a certificate that lives on the F5. And then I'll also show you various options for managing the automation process within the CertCentral platform. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a quick look at my F5 that I'm going to be using for this demonstration. And I'll just show you the current situation, so you can check that against what we see on CertCentral. And then we'll go through and we will reissue the certificate that's living on this virtual IP address, which we're looking at now. So first of all, on the top left, you can see the management IP address up here. That's the one ending in 175. So we'll see that in CertCentral when we look at the F5 as a whole. But also you can see I've got a very simple configuration here with one virtual server. And you can probably see on the right-hand side here, the virtual server IP address, or the VIP, is ending 177. And so we'll look at that as well, because that's the location where the SSL certificate resides, and that's the one that we'll be changing. So we have a quick or a bit more detailed look at this virtual server on the F5. There's a couple of things that I can quickly show you here. First of all, if we look down, we can see the SSL client profile here. And this has a fairly long name here, but this is the profile that we're using currently on that virtual server. And if we look at that in more detail, we can also see details of the certificate that we're going to be, that we're currently using on the F5. So let me have a quick look at that client SSL profile, and I think it's this one here. I'll have a quick look at that, and again you can see the details here of the current certificates which are supporting that virtual server on the client profile, and they've all got a name which starts Dave F5. There's also a timestamp in here which is 22, which is the year March 23rd. So if you want to have a quick look at the certificate from within the F5, we can go down and we can look at the certificate and just look at that briefly. Again, this is the certificate here. Let's have a quick look at that in a bit more detail. And you can see here we have the serial number. So the serial number starts 01 and ends in 50. So now I'm going to try and locate that on the CertCentral platform, because this F5 is currently under management with our CertCentral platform. So we should be able to locate that certificate and just verify we're talking to the same F5 on the same port by checking the serial number is the same on CertCentral. So in my next tab, I have my CertCentral platform, and I've just clicked on the automation options on the left-hand side, and you can see there's about 6 different options that we can go into here as well. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to locate that particular virtual IP on the F5. So if I go into the Manage Automation screen on CertCentral, we can start off by just locating my F5. Now you can probably see there's not many options in here. This one, which is called Dave F5, has the management IP address that I was just looking at, ending in 175. So this obviously belongs to the same F5 that we were just looking at. Now I will come back to this screen a little later, but what I'm going to do now is just click on the F5, and I'm going to look at this panel on the right hand side, which gives me a bit more information about this. So you can see it's the host name there, or the management IP address, is 175. It knows it's an F5 big IP version 14. But what I really wanted to look at here was the IP port combinations. So this will give me a list of all the virtual IPs that we've configured on this F5. So let me click on that. And you should see this matches what we were just looking at on the F5. So again, this is the virtual server IP address, which ends 177. This is the common name of the certificate that's currently on that virtual IP. And if we look at this, again, a little window pops up. We can verify that the serial number matches the serial number we looked at on the F5. So it starts with 01 and ends in 50. So this is the current certificate on that F5 virtual IP address. And we know about it because we automatically provisioned it previously from CertCentral. So what happens if I want to reissue that certificate? And this could obviously be for any reason, but typically customers like to reissue certificates frequently for security reasons. And of course, having automation tools in place makes it very quick and easy to do that. So I'm going to just go through a very quick and simple reissue to get a new certificate onto that F5. And I'll show you how you do that. And then we'll come back and look at some of the other options in a bit more detail after I've set that going. So you can see on the right-hand side of this screen, we have a reissue option here. I'm just going to click on reissue. It will bring up a screen for me to fill out the details. I can make some changes here if I want to, but just to keep things really simple, I'm not going to make any changes at all at the moment. I will come back to this screen later, but all I'm going to do is just check that I'm going to do an immediate reissue by making sure we have the schedule set to now. And all I'm going to do now is just say, yes, I agree to the legal terms, and I'm going to start the automation. So that's really all you need to do if you want to do an immediate reissue. You log into CertCentral, you locate the virtual IP, and you click on reissue. It's really that simple. And so now what's come up is we've gone back to this virtual IP, and the common name is showing again. And now we've got a status panel on the right-hand side. And this will take us through the various steps of the certificate lifecycle automation. So essentially what's happening now is that the CertCentral is communicating with the F5. It's telling it to generate a CSR for the new certificate, and also, of course, a new private key. The private key, of course, will stay on the F5. That won't leave the F5. But when the CSR is ready, it will be uploaded to CertCentral, and we'll request a new certificate based on that CSR. Once that's been approved, we'll then download it and automatically install it on that virtual server. And of course, not only will we install the certificate, we'll install a new client profile, and we'll point the virtual server to that new client profile. So you may have seen, as I was talking, a couple of green ticks appeared. This process is actually very quick. Usually it takes less than a minute, but it can take up to maybe 5 minutes depending on various configurations in your system. The other thing that can cause a delay in this process is that if your CertCentral account is configured for manual approval, there may be a delay where an administrator has to log in and approve the issuance of the new certificate. Now, in my account, I've got automatic approval set, so there shouldn't be any delay while we wait for that to be approved. And as you probably saw, that has also happened within a few seconds. So as soon as the CSR is uploaded, we've automatically approved it. And now we're just waiting for the final step, which is to actually install it on the F5 and validate that it's been installed successfully. So that might take a few more moments. So while we're waiting for that to just complete, I'm going to go and show you a few of the other areas within CertCentral where you can manage your automation. So I'll just go back and quickly show you again the Manage Automation window within the CertCentral platform. And as you probably saw before, this is where you would list all the different systems under automation. And as you may know, with our automation tools, we can automate certificates on a variety of different platforms. So load balancers like the F5 or Citrix, but also web servers like Apache or Microsoft IIS. So all these are different systems under management. And if we look at the F5, for example, we've got the management IP address shown here, and it also tells us who it's being managed by. And when we're talking about a load balancer like an F5, this is going to be relating to the sensor that we're using. Remember, the sensor is a separate piece of software that you download, and you have to configure it with the details of the load balancer, or the F5 in this case, that you want it to be managing. So if you need more details on the sensor, you can just click on the link here, and you can see a bit more information about the sensor itself. So that will include things like the software version of the sensor, the license key, the IP address, the platform it's installed on, and so on and so on. And also we have a very useful option at the bottom here, which is the update option. So I've got mine currently set to update automatically, which means that anytime we have a new version of the sensor software, it'll automatically download and install itself on my server, on my sensor platform. Some customers prefer the second option, which is prompt me. All that means is when there's a new version available, you'll see a message in the CertCentral console. And when you're ready, you can click a button to actually install the new software. And that's probably more important or more appropriate for customers that have a change control process, which means that they're not going to install any new versions until they've had a chance to test them. So if that's you, you should choose this prompt me option. If you're not quite so fussy, then you can choose the update automatically. As I said, anytime a new version comes out, that will automatically be installed for you. So those were the main items on the Manage Automation screen. The other thing to show you here, again, if I click on my F5, you'll see there are some other options here which are specific to the F5. So for example, if you are using HSMs or something like that, then you have various options for how you store the private key for your certificates. Also, if you have an HA configuration, maybe an active backup kind of configuration with 2 or more F5s, again, you can configure that in here as well. As you saw, my system is very simple. I have a single F5, so I don't have any choices to make in terms of an HA configuration. Also, I'll look at this screen here. This is the profiles screen. So profiles are a very kind of convenient way of managing all the information you need when you're doing automation. So you may have multiple profiles here. And if we look at an example profile, this is going to contain information such as, what type of certificate do you want to install? So you put all the details into the profile, and then the benefit of that is that when you do automation, you just have to choose the appropriate profile, and you don't need to re-enter any of these details again. So you can see the kind of things that we store in the profile is, contact information, division information, if you have those in your CertCentral account. Very importantly, which type of DigiCert certificate do you want to issue from CertCentral? information about what's called your multi-year plan. So as you may know, public certificates have a 1-year maximum lifetime, but within CertCentral, you may have a plan which allows you to pay for certificates for multiple years. So you can set that also in the profile here. And down here, we have what's called the auto renew option. So again, this can be set in the profile. And again, what this means is that if you wish, then CertCentral will automatically renew your certificates before they expire. And by default, we have a 30-day period before expiration where we will deploy your new certificate. If you prefer a different time period, you can just set that. So maybe you prefer 15 days before expiration, that's fine. And also down here, you can see we have another option down here where we will check to see if the certificate is revoked. And if it is, again, we'll auto replace it with a new certificate. So again, this is the option to choose if you want to just set the policy once and then have CertCentral automatically reissue your certificates before they expire. Also in here, you're going to see information about the organization, about the contacts. You can add more contacts if you want to inside this profile. And also we have what are called custom fields here, which are normally optional fields where you can get more information about the order. So that's what's in the profile. Typically, you wouldn't have that many profiles, maybe two or three. In our demonstration account here, we have a dozen or so, but normally you wouldn't need to have quite so many. And then the last place I'll show you is what's called the automated IP screen. And this is where we just list all the different, if you like, IP addresses where we're automating certificates. So this could be a long list because, you know, if you're a typical customer, you may be having multiple F5s with multiple virtual IP addresses, with maybe multiple servers as well with certificates. This could be quite a long list, but it does allow you to kind of individually monitor and select specific IP addresses that you want to manage. So in fact, if I look at this one, the third one down, I'm pretty sure is the virtual IP address for my F5 virtual IP that I was just working with. Again, we can see the address of the virtual server is showing here. It's a big IP virtual version 14, and it does say here automation successful. So if I click on the link which says automation successful, we can see indeed that the whole process did complete successfully. We've got a green tick by certificate installation, which was the one thing that we were still waiting for last time we checked. And we have some details below about the certificate that we installed, including the common name, the hash algorithm, etc. So now if I close that down and I go back and look at the actual certificate now that CertCentral has deployed, let's get the details on that. We can look at the serial number here. And again, so now we see a new serial number. So this is the new certificate we just deployed through the automation process. Starts with 07 and ends with 3D. So what we should do now is return to the F5 and check the configuration to see if it matches what we're looking at here. So I'm going to head back to my F5. I'm going to go back to my virtual servers. So this is the virtual server, again, that we were working with. IP address ends 177. Let's have a look at the details of this. And you may be able to see here the SSL profile. Actually, this has changed. You may not be able to see the details last time, but every time we deploy a new certificate to a virtual IP, we're going to deploy a new client profile. And the reason we do that is because we're not going to delete the old one. In case you need to roll back to a previous version, The old one is still stored on the F5, but the new one is deployed and becomes active for that virtual server on the F5. And you can probably see from this screen that the profile name has the name or the common name of the certificate as the first part. Then it has a timestamp with today's date, and then it has some random characters in case you have more than one that you deployed on the same date. And we can also have a look at so if I look at these random characters, it ends in TON2, right? So what we can now do is we can have a look at our client profiles within the F5. And here's the one ending TON2. This is the one that we just deployed. This is now the active one. If we look inside this client profile, we should be able to see the certificate information. And again, it's got the same kind of information, the same name with a timestamp, and it ends TON2 as the last 4 characters. So that is the certificate that's deployed in the active client profile for the SSL, the virtual server that we're looking at. So now I just need to look at that particular certificate to make sure it matches what we were looking at into CertCentral. So I'll do that by looking at my certificates here. And here's the one which ends TON2 with today's timestamp. Let's look at the details of that. And you can probably see the serial number here starts with 07 and ending in 3D. So again, that's going to match what we deployed just now from CertCentral. So that concludes the demonstration of F5 certificate automation within CertCentral. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you find it useful.